So much like the front of the tower, this section of the house that pivots, we want to put some brads on the bottom just to reduce the surface tension and help it pivot a little bit more. So I think what I'm going to do is measure in 3/4 of an inch from all the sides and put one kind of in those spots like that, and then I think two centered there. So I'm just going to poke a hole with my awl and put the brad in, obviously without spreading its brad legs, and then, but I'll use some glossy accents or diamond glaze to help them stay in. So I'll put those in and then I'll be back. So I think you can see here that I've also put an extra row in the middle. So I have 9 little brads. I decided brads are cheap, so I'd rather err on the side of having a few too many than not enough. One thing to remember, if you put a row in here in the center, that we do have a brace in the bottom. You can kind of locate that, kind of like if you were doing working on your house and looking for studs in the wall, just by tapping, and you'll hear a different sound when you're above that solid piece. You kind of can just push in a little bit on it too and see where that is. So these may not end up being exactly in the center here because of the location of that brace piece in the bottom. So I'm going to let that glue set up and then we'll move on. Now that the glue has set up on our little brads, we can take a moment and see how much or how thick of a shim we need to add to the stationary part of the house to account for the brads that we put on here. Now, as you recall, in the tower we just used a piece of the medium weight chipboard. Here I'm just going to do a little testing and see what would work. So I'm just taking a spare piece of chipboard and holding it up against the brads that I put in there, and then I'm going to try putting a piece of medium weight chipboard in there, which looks like it's pushing this piece away a little bit. So then I've got a piece of the leftover of the lightweight chipboard, and that fits in there easily. So what I want to do is try a lightweight one over here. And I'll just put this piece underneath the stationary part of the house. I've just got that edge lined up. And now I'm going to bring in the moving part. And we have a magnet on the bottom. And I'm just kind of seeing how that works. And holding the hinge over here on the top side. You know, we haven't attached it yet. And I think for me that lightweight chipboard is going to work just fine. You may find that you need a piece of the medium weight chipboard. Kind of depends on the size of your brads. I have some pretty small ones here. So now that I've made that determination, I'm going to cut this scrap of the lightweight chipboard to be the size of the bottom of my stationary house, and it should be, yes, 5 3/8 inch long and 3 5/8 wide. So mine is 3 5/8 by 5 3/8, and that's what yours should be too. So I'm going to cut that piece and attach it to the bottom of the stationary part of the house. Now these edges will get covered with our foundation paper, but I'm still going to, in case anything wants to peek through, on just blacken my edges of this medium weight chipboard just with my Copic marker. So I'll get that cut to size and attached, and then we'll be ready to move on. Now we're ready to put our foundation paper on, and I'm starting with the back stationary portion of the house. I'm actually looking at the back right here. So we need a piece on the back that wraps around 1/2 inch on this side and about 1.5 inches or so on this side. So I've cut a strip that is 7.5 inches long, and this is our normal 1 3/4 inch foundation paper that's been scored at the bottom at 1/2 inch. And then I scored it in 1/2 inch on this side, and then I measured over 5 3/8 inches and scored it again because 5 3/8 is the width of our house section. And then I've made some release cuts, as you can see here, so that when it bends around the base, it'll go nicely around the base. So I've got that one to put on the back. And then for the front side where the niche is, I've cut this strip 6 3/8, and then I scored it in 1/2 inch on either side, and again made our little cuts at the bottom so that this can fit right around the bottom like so. So I'll go ahead and attach those pieces, and then I'll be back. So I have my foundation paper added, and as you can see I've also added the black trim that we usually have on the top of the foundation. And now we're ready to do the front side of the house. And before we add the paper for the front side of the house, we want to see if any height adjustments need to be made. So I have the magnets are attached here between the houses, and I'm holding them with good pressure together, and now I can see where the top of that foundation paper from the back side meets the front side. And remember, it's because we have those little brads on the front side, so we might have a little bit of a difference. So depending on how thick your chipboard addition was on the back side, you may need to trim off between a 32nd and a 1/16 of an inch. Or you can just, don't let it bother you. It's not that big of a change. So I'll make a little tick mark there and measure my paper, and if it's different, and I think it's going to be a little less than 1.25 inches, I'll go ahead and trim that off of the bottom edge of my foundation, and then I will do the scoring at 1/2 inch. So I'll be back when I've got my paper strips ready to go. So I have 2 strips here at 12 inches that have been prepared. I've got them scored as on the bottom, as you can see, and it will take 2 strips to go around this side of the house. Now before I put them on, I've come here on the edge of the porch and just taken my black Copic marker and come down at least 1/8 of an inch. You can come down 1/4 of an inch, just so it looks black there, so that when this comes up, it'll kind of imitate the black strip that we usually put on top of the foundation paper going around there. And I've done that on all 3 sides of the porch. Now we'll put the strip on the outside here first, and we want this line here to line exactly with our green paper, and so we can measure down here and see how far that will be until we need to make a score. And on mine that is 5 3/8, so it'll be 5 3/8 to the first score, and then this should be 5 3/8 coming across the front here, and it is. So I'll make 2 scores at 5 3/8. And they're coming in from this side, so I'll flip my paper to make sure I'm measuring in from the correct side. So I'm going to go 5 3/8 there. I should have gotten my big scoreboard out. So we'll come 5 3/8 in to the first one, and then 5 3/8 in for the second one. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches, and 3/8 is 1, 2, 3. So that's at the second score will be at 10 3/4. And we don't need quite this much overlapping at the end, so I'm going to trim that back to about a 1/2 inch. So I'll go ahead and get this strip installed, and then we'll look at the second strip. So now I have the outside and the front covered, and we're ready to do the inside and the niche side, and we'll do a little measuring again, and that is 5 3/8, and then this should be 5 3/8 too, and it is. I'm going to cut this just a little bit shy of 10 3/4, like a 1/16 of an inch shy of 10 3/4, just so that edge won't come right up against there. And then I'll score it. So I'll make one score here at 5 3/8 and go ahead and get that piece installed. So I just want to show you this strip before I install it. I made the notch here, of course, where it bends, but also at the ends I've notched in the underneath here. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this on the other side, I have inked all of these edges as well. And now I'll just finish the edges. I'm not going to put anything where the porch is, but just where it meets the green paper. Now before we connect the two sides together, I've also decided to add a piece of black trim right along the top of this orange, and so I'll measure and get that installed as well. So now we're ready to join the two sides with the Tyvek hinge. And I just have them, their magnets are holding them in place for right now. And before we take this strip off, we just want to look up here at the top. Oops, let me get on camera. Look up here at the top and trim this off so that it's not hanging over the roof line. And then once that's trimmed, make sure your magnets are in place, kind of check everything out, make sure it's where you want it to be, and then go ahead and burnish the Tyvek strip down. Remember, it has a inch wide piece of score tape here on the side. And once that Tyvek strip has been burnished on really well, you can just kind of hold down here on the back a little bit and then pull on your knob. and that side will hinge open. So now we have our hinged right side of our house.